I would like to speak about generally the objectives of meditation. But before we start with the objectives of meditation, let's take a look at ourselves. Self, this S-E-L-F, self. Every morning before we go to work, before we go to school, university, I think that's what most people do. They look at the mirror. They brush their teeth, of course, they look at the mirror. When we look at the mirror, we look at ourself. This S-E-L-F, self. What is this so-called self? Isn't that important? Self is yourself, himself, themselves. Some people call this self the ego, ego, ego. Or some people call it the habitual mind, because you tend to habitually think in a certain way. Or some people call it the ego mind. Not the real mind, it's the ego mind, the egoistic mind. Many sutras said the self, this S-E-L-F, self, is the 5 aggregates. Now, people who have been listening to the Heart Sutra, the Hridaya Sutra, they would know what the 5 aggregates are, but I guess many people here, they don't understand what are the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates is body, perception, conception, volition, and consciousness. There's 5. Body is body. Perception, conception, volition, and consciousness is the spiritual part of it. It's the mind. So the self is a combination of the body and mind. We call it body and mind. Who are we? What is this self? It's a combination of body and mind. Any exception? That includes everything. Your body, your physical body, your skin, your skeleton, your internal organs, the material part of it, the molecules part of it, the protons, the electrons, the body cell. But other than the material part, there's also the spiritual part, That's your perception, your conception, your volition, your consciousness. When we say, I see, we are referring the self to our perception. When we say, I think, this is what I think, the self all of a sudden becomes our conception, because that's what you think. And when we say, I shall do this or that, then the self becomes volition. And when we carry our thoughts into action and speech, and then every action, every speech, every thought stores in the memory, the self has suddenly becomes the consciousness, the conglomerate consciousness. So people say, that's the self. What am I talking about here? Talking about the self? That's the most important concept spiritually. Do you understand yourself? People say, of course, that's myself. Of course I understand myself. Can you control yourself? Of course I can control myself. This is my body. This is my perception. This is my conception. This is what I think. This is what I see. If people say they can control themselves, how come they become mad? How come they become jealous? How come they become greedy? How come they commit crime? How come they hurt other people? How come they kill animals for food? How come they torture animals? How come they torture people and prisoners of war? How come they wipe out the whole tribe? So we've got to study this self. That's the objective of meditation. Everything becomes so personal around us when we grasp onto the self. You grasp on it, you never let go of it. You grasp on this self, and there comes suffering, anger, all the shortcomings such as jealousy, hatred, anxiety, self-aggrandizement, your exaggeration of yourself, your egoistic feelings, your obstinacy, your hatred, and so on. These things in our daily lives torture us, All these things torture us, and you don't even know about it. Why did you cry? Why did you get grief-stricken when you were in hardship? These things torture you, and you don't know about it. You blame somebody else for it. You blame your brothers and sisters. You blame your parents. You blame the society, not yourself. You never blame yourself. You blame your father for you being poor. But you didn't pay attention to education. Some people say, John's father had a huge legacy and he was able to be rich. He's rich because of his father. My father is poor. But there are some people who don't depend on their fathers. They become rich. They struggle themselves. What about that? We take our thoughts, emotions, and experience so personally that the self has become the underlying attachment to all things, whether they are material or spiritual. We're attached to a strong element of self in everything we think. Everything about me, mine. I read an article and it says, in daily conversation, the one word that you use the most is what? I, mine, me. This I, mine, me, is all egoistic. Will I gain? Will I lose? Is it fair for me? Is it good for me? This is mine. I have the right. I have my privacy. Don't infringe on my benefits. You always try to cherish and protect yourself. This constant attempt to satisfy the self makes us very vulnerable, You think you are strong? You think we are strong? We are very vulnerable. Because this vulnerable self always required what? Required the wall of protection and the gathering of energy to sustain that protection. As a result, we're increasingly fearful of losing things and increasingly uncertain that if things would not work our way. We have anxiety. When you're studying in university, before you graduate, will I get a job? Will I drop out? Can I get into university? If I get married, will I get a divorce? Now I'm married, will I get a broken homes? What happens if I get laid off? All these anxieties, all this vulnerability, that's suffering. They torture us. Why? The Buddha unfolded that to you since 2,500 years ago. He teaches us to look at ourselves, to know yourself. We call it self-reflection. It takes courage and wisdom to lift the mystery of the self and go beyond it to see who we actually are. Who we actually are. This is one of the main facets of Buddhist teaching. To reduce the ego and to make room for contemplating the truth. Can you reduce your ego? Can you look at your ego? Can you go beyond ego? Can you lift the mystery of the ego? People say, I don't care. That's the problem. You allow your ego to torture you, continuously torture you in this life in your next life. You have been tortured in your past life already. You didn't know about it. This is self-reflection that we need. And we call it meditation. That's meditation. That's the objective of meditation. Not about getting blessings from Buddha. The actual practice of meditation requires us to step back, not succumbing to the momentum of the habitual mind. Your habitual mind has gotten into trouble. Your habitual mind is stereotyping. Your habitual mind is discriminating. Your habitual mind is labeling people. Prejudice. So this self-reflection allows us to pause from attaching to the ego and look at it without judgment and deception. That's meditation. So we need to look for the self, to look beyond the self. But the irony is that when you start to look for the self, you can't find it. Can you find yourself? Is it a color? Is it a shape? Is it a triangle? Is it a rectangle? Where is yourself? When you look for the self, I'm looking for myself. Where is it? When you look for it, you know, I can't find it. It's an irony. It's like a ghost. It's like a ghost that dominated your house. You can't find the ghost. But your house is tidy and neat. The bed is made, the breakfast is done, everything is clean, toilet, washroom, everything is okay. But you can't find the ghost. That ghost is haunting you. That ghost of egoism, that ghost of the polluted self is haunting you and me, and we don't know about it. Usually when we meditate on questions, on a poem, but just now we meditate on the tip of the nose. Why? Because that approach is concentration. But sometimes we take another approach. We raise questions. We raise koans, K-O-A-N, koan. We raise a question and we contemplate on it. Questions like, who is reciting the Buddha name? In the Chinese language it is, 念佛是谁? Who is reciting the Buddha name? Who is this guy, me, who is chanting? Who am I before I am born? Where were I before? All these questions come up. We use these questions to look as techniques to start to look for the self, try to understand the self. But the self is not real. It is just an emotional attachment. It is greediness, anxiety, fear, and depression, ignorance that deceptively exist. They're not substantial. They're insubstantial. They all arise and interact with the outside world. When we meditate, we can actually see through this seemingly solid self. But what are we left with after meditation? We are left with what? With an opening, intelligent awareness. When we look at the self, we look at this self. Who am I? And what we got left with? We got left with this awareness. We are aware of that. In other words, we know there is a self, but that self cannot be found. That self is responsible for all that I have done. If I know it, I got the magic to it. The Buddha knew it. The Buddha knew the real self. And he wanted you to know. You want to solve that problem of yourself? You look at that. If you want to solve the problem, you got to look at the root of the problem. You want to know why people kill? Why people steal? Why people commit sexual misconduct? Why people drink intoxicants? You don't just look at the superficial actions that he did. You look at why he did it. The root of it. How can we eliminate those evil roots? If you're an educator, if you're the Prime Minister of Education, you try to analyze what kind of education you should give to the kids. Do you just analyze the kids' outright actions? You go to the deeper. Why do they behave like that? What do they need? How do we reform? How do we change them? Not just by looking at the superficial, fictitious, outer meaning. So that the questions of the importance of meditation arises. You need meditation every day. If everybody knows the importance of meditation, this will be much society to live in, because everyone is careful of his own awareness. He's aware of what he's been doing. He wouldn't know. He doesn't know. People say, I don't know what I'm doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. Why did people kill? Because at that juncture of violence, he didn't know what he was doing. Usually when the judge said, or when the lawyers, the accused lawyer or the defense lawyer said, Mr. Klein, why did you do that? I didn't know. I was so furious. I was so mad that I just did it. Can you help me out? Can you defend me? I just killed him and I don't know why. It was just at the spur of the moment that I did it. He couldn't control himself. You run into many, many moments like that. You simply can't. You don't know yourself. You're not aware of yourself. What happens if you're always aware of yourself? Magic comes. Because you're in control. Looking at the ego is important, at the self is important. Not attaching to it. Just look at it. This is the only way to know that it does not exist. It can be found. If the self does not exist, so how can we take all our thoughts, emotions, and experiences so personally? If yourself does not exist, how come you take your emotions, your passions, your experiences so personally and start to defend yourself, cherish yourself, and hurt others? The self does not exist. I remember when I first meditate and look at myself, a self-reflection, I felt a strong sense of freedom. I can step back from it and look at it without being bound by it. What a relief. What a liberation. I look at myself without being bound by it. I can step back and look at it. Always step back and look at yourself. Then you become more careful. You won't commit mistakes. So, meditation is important. And some people say, okay, I've been meditating for a number of years, and how come I still have these wandering thoughts? I still attach to myself, and I have thoughts and emotions coming up. And thoughts and emotion, why? Why did it always come up? It's natural that your mind is always activated, thought after thought. Emotions, thoughts will always come up. That's the natural tendency of the mind. The purpose of the practice is not to get rid of them right away. We can, however, choose to face them and work with them. You work with your own emotions and passions. You just watch them. And you know that they're nothing but sensations. These emotions, crying, yelling, shouting, being angry, being jealous, and all that, they're sensations. They're fictitious. They're not self. You look at them. You work with them. You don't try to fence them. You don't try to kill them. You just step back and look at them. You're like a mountain, and these clouds go by. You don't carry away by the clouds. You're that mountain. You don't move. The clouds move. You don't move. The clouds come. Oh, here comes the cloud. The cloud of obstinacy. Here comes the cloud of jealousy. Here comes the cloud of greediness. that overwhelms me. Okay, it overwhelms me, I watched it, and I let it go. Let it be, let it go. Can you be a third person contemplating on that, watching on that? It sounds simple, but it's extremely difficult. When we don't judge or discriminate, when we don't judge and discriminate these emotions and thoughts as good or bad, right or wrong, favorable, unfavorable, we can utilize them to progress on our spiritual odyssey, our spiritual path. Well, you don't try to get rid of them, you don't kill them, you don't fence them off, you just watch them, interact with them, and see them. Here comes hatred that overwhelms me. Oh, I let go of it. I won't be overwhelmed by it. I just watched it. You step back. Can you step back? Sometimes I can. I'm still learning. But it's important that you know. It's important that you know you have to have that kind of awareness. We utilize thoughts and emotions by watching them arise and dissolve. As we do this, we see they are insubstantial. When we are able to see through them, we realize that they can't really bind us. They can't really lead us astray or distort our sense of reality. So never try to fence them off. Just work with them, allow them to arise and allow them to fall. So it's just like when we are watching a movie, a Hollywood movie, when we're watching a movie, when we're watching a movie in the cinema house, we can relax and enjoy the show. We relax and relax. The last movie I saw as a monk, we can't go to the cinema house. The last movie I saw was Forrest Gump. Have you seen that movie, Forrest Gump? It's an interesting movie. And I remember there's a saying in there. It says that life is a box of chocolates. My mom told me that life is a box of chocolate. You never know what you're going to get, or something like that. When you watch a movie, when you watch a movie, you can relax and enjoy the show because we know it's an illusion. It's not real. You're not involved with it. Good or bad, you're not involved with it. Some people kill in there, you're not involved with it. Because you're not involved with it, you relax, you enjoyed it. Can you do the same thing in real life? Every time when you watch something, you watch as if you're objectively watching it. The show goes on, but you relax, you enjoyed it, but you don't get involved with it. Can you do the same thing? Well, what we call real life or reality works much the same way. It's like a show. When you work a show, what is a movie? A movie is a combination of a projector, a screen, of course you have a script, you have a director, actors, projectors, lights, everything, cinema house and all that. That comes together to get a show, and you're watching it, you relax, you watched it. In the real life, it's the same thing. Our body and mind, body, perception, conception, relations, as well as bodies of everybody, as well as everything in this world, is a life show. When we look at all around us, we can see that nothing exists in isolation. We're all related to each other. All the causes, all the conditions put together, that's a life show. That's known as interdependence or causality. Everything depends on an intimate number of causes and conditions to come into being, arise and fall, and moment by moment. And there's one cause depend on another cause, one condition depend on another conditions. They are interdependent. It's just like in your real life, your life experiences is like a script of the show. And that script is not written in isolation. That script relates to what? That script depends on your parents, your brothers and sisters, the society, your job, schoolings. All these things are interrelated. We call it interdependent causality. And everything is so intricately connected, it is hard to find a point where one thing starts and another ends. This is what we meant by illusory or the empty nature of phenomena. Emptiness. Because one cause depends on the other. You can't identify which is the beginning one, which is the end one. There's no beginning and no end. Remember, it's logical. When you say there's a beginning, there must be an end. But if there's an end, there's a problem. If there's a beginning, there's an end, there's a logical problem. Why? Because if there is an end, that means there's no causality. You understand what I mean? If there is an end, that means nihilism. That means as long as I'm happy, I can kill, I can do whatever I want as long as I'm happy. I am happy because after this life is an end, no more life. If that's your conception, that is extremely dangerous. That's the conception of a criminal. A criminal wants happiness and he can do whatever he wants. He can kill, he can do whatever he wants. Because after this life is ended, no more. The danger of recognizing an ending is extremely serious. It's a loop. There's no beginning, no end. All interdependent. Beginning and end lives only in the world of discrimination. In a world where they identify something as favorable, unfavorable, right or wrong, tall and short, ugly and beauty. Get away that discrimination. That is a discrimination that does not pertains to the real mind, the real self. That's not the mind that the Buddha identified to us 2,500 years ago. Watching our mind can be more enjoyable than watching a movie, you know. Watching a movie. You think watching a movie is enjoyable? When you come here on every Saturday, you don't know you are doing something more enjoyable than watching a movie. Watching a movie is a third-party thing. Nothing to do with you. You pay. You pay the cinema house. I don't know how much. I forgot how much. I used to pay $3.50. How much they charge now? $8. So, watching a movie, watching your own mind is more enjoyable than watching a movie because your own mind deals with yourself, your personal experiences. And if you are successful in watching it, you will lead a better life, a happier life. You are your own director. You are your own actor. You are your own audience. You're all in one. Remember this concept? All in one, one in all. All is one, one is all. You write your own script. People say, what's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of living? Living itself has no meaning. You write your own meaning onto the script. What do you want to mean in your script? You want a meaningful life or a meaningless life? You write onto it yourself. So watching our mind can be more enjoyable than watching a movie. We don't need the projector, the screen, the light, the script, and the actors. We have our own script. This script is our own life experiences. It includes not just your karmic life. It includes also, on the bad side, the samsara. On the good side, the perfect side, the nirvana. You know the meaning of samsara and nirvana? Samsara is the reincarnation. It's submerging yourself in the sea of life and death, in the ocean of life and death. You die this life. You know, you don't have just this life, you know. You have a past. You have past lives. You have this present one life. And if you are not enlightened, you still go into samsara, life and death. You have millions of lives later. You are John and Joan. You are John this life, Joan next life. You're female this life, and you could be male next life. Depends on your karma, on what you have done. Every thought, every action in you register karmic energy. Be careful of your thought. The thought is the forerunner of your action and speech. every action, every thought, every speech register a karmic energy in your memory, in your consciousness. You can't get away with it. You think somebody hurt you and they can get away with it? Causality would get them. Karma would get them. You think you render people benefit, you help people, and that good karma is forgotten? The recipient of your benefits could forget about you, don't care about you, but karma would repay you. I help all my friends and they all betray me. I lend them $600 and they never return them to me. I love my husband, but my husband betray me. Your love, your energy is there. It's not forgotten. It's registered. You love your son, but your son has no filial piety towards you. You've done your responsibility as a father. You register that good karmic energy in there. It does not matter. Let it be. There's a song by the Beatles, Let It Be. Is it by the Beatles? By the Beatles? That's very philosophical. Let it be, let it be, let it flow. So watching your mind is more enjoyable than watching a movie. Watching a movie, you need to buy a ticket. You go to the Odeon Theater, you need to buy this ticket. What is our ticket in meditation? That ticket is meditation itself, self-reflection. That ticket is your self-reflection, your ability to watch it, your ability to step back and know it, your ability to create that intelligent awareness. That's your ticket. Don't lose your ticket. You lose your ticket, you don't have a seat. You need that ticket. You hold on to that ticket. Don't lose your seat. Every day you hold that ticket, you create that intelligent awareness, and you progress on your spiritual path. And one day, this wisdom will unfold to you. You get it. You're getting more and more. You're getting wiser and wiser. When you're getting wiser and wiser, you are happier and happier. You're in control. The questions about meditation is, some people don't have the patience. They come for a few times and they forget about that. People come and go, coming and going. And so I always admire people who hang on for quite a while. A lot of people come and go. Some people just come once and they think they know it all. I learn it. Some people told me just to cross my legs and watch my nose tip. And that's it, very simple. You know it is simple, but it's difficult. There was once a story in one of the ancient books of China. It was written like that. There was a scholar who went to ask a Dharma master, a Zen master, and he asked, "Venerable Master, what is Buddhism?" And this Venerable Master said, "Buddhism is to abstain from evil deeds, to do and encourage all good deeds, purify your thought. That's Buddhism." So it sounds simple. To abstain from doing bad deeds, to do and encourage good deeds, and purify your mind, it sounds so simple. And the scholar said, "Isn't it that so simple? That's so simple." And the Zen master said, "Yes, it is so simple that a 5-year-old knows about it, but it's so complicated that 100 years old could not accomplish it." Protons, the electrons, the body cell. But other than the material part, there's also the spiritual part, you know. That's your perception, your conception, your volition, your consciousness. When you say, or when we say, I see, we are referring the self to our perception. When we say, I think, this is what I think, the self all of a sudden becomes our conception, because that's what you think. And when we say, I shall do this or that, some people call it the ego mind. Not the real mind, it's the ego mind, the egoistic mind. Many sutras said the self, this S-E-L-F, self, is the 5 aggregates. Now, people who have been listening to the Heart Sutra, the Hridaya Sutra, they would know what the 5 aggregates are, but I guess many people here, they don't understand what are the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates is body, perception, conception, volition, and consciousness. There's 5. Body is body. Perception, conception, volition, and consciousness is the spiritual part of it. It's the mind. So the self is a combination of the body and mind. We call it body and mind. Who are we? What is this self? It's a combination of body and mind. Any exception? That includes everything. Your body, your physical body, your skin, your skeleton, your internal organs, the material part of it, the molecules part of it. I would like to speak about generally the objectives of meditation. But before we start with the objectives of meditation, let's take a look at ourselves. Self, this S-E-L-F, self. Every morning before we go to work, before we go to school, university, I think that's what most people do. They look at the mirror. They brush their teeth, of course, they look at the mirror. When we look at the mirror, we look at ourself. This S-E-L-F, self. What is this so-called self? Isn't that important? Self is yourself, himself, themselves. Some people call this self the ego, ego, ego. Or some people call it the habitual mind, because you tend to habitually think in a certain way. Or